Canada introduces a new online harms bill, which they proposed a new online harms bill. It's not passed into law yet, but it might be very soon. That it seeks to tackle hate speech on the internet. This, this bill, it's the idea, the intention might sound like it makes sense, right? We're tackling people who are, like bigoted and hateful, and say things that might make other people feel unsafe, might threaten, might like affect children negatively, and all this stuff. So I kind of maybe understand where they're coming from, but the way that they have implemented this bill, the way that they have written this bill, is somewhat problematic in my opinion. And by the way, I'm not the only one that thinks so. So the Canadian Civil Liberties Association and the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council were among the signatories to an open letter that came out against this. So even the Muslim Public Affairs Council, which you think that hate speech, the Muslim community would support hate speech protection because they're often the target of hate speech, unfortunately, right? But in this case, apparently, even the Muslim Public Affairs Council are against it. And the reason is because of its potential impacts on free speech, right? So the way that they've proposed this bill, first of all, I think I haven't read this bill myself, but Elon Musk has joined the controversy, and he retweeted this tweet that suggested that there might be potential for retroactivity for this bill to retroactively prosecute someone who has posted hate speech in the past. So that's if true. And again, I haven't been able to verify exactly whether this is true because, excuse me, I've heard I've heard competing opinions or competing theories as to whether or not it would allow for retroactive prosecution. But we'll leave that debate maybe to another day if once we get that confirmed. But let me just say that if it is retroactive, then this is a huge problem in of itself. But even if it isn't, the way that the bill is written is that they will establish a regulatory body to mitigate the categories identified by the bill as illegal or harmful content that negatively affects Canadians, especially Canadian youth. This is a very broad definition, right? Like it literally just says it's identified by this regulatory body as harmful content that can negatively affect Canadians. So this could be a whole variety of content. Problem number two is that or it's related to problem number one, is that this regulatory body in of itself will have to be created. So this isn't a regulatory body that's attached to that exists already. It would be a new regulatory body called the Digital Safety Commission, which, if approved, will be the most powerful regulator of Canada's internet. There's all kinds of problems with this bill, right? But let me just before I impart my own opinion, let me toss that question to you, Tristan. Are you concerned about this bill and its potential impact on free speech? And what do you think of this bill in general? Do you think that we even need this bill in general to protect against hate speech, or do you think that people should just be allowed to say most things on the internet if it doesn't have let's say an immediate threat to public safety or anything? But if it's just people being racist or being hateful on the internet, do you think that should be allowed, or do you think we should establish a regulatory body to shut them down and potentially even arrest them or fine them retroactively, potentially?
Right. I think that it's way too sweeping. Right. I think there's what is being described here, what could be considered hate speech, is very broad. And the retroactive nature means that anything you've said in the past can be brought up against you. And because the definition is so broad, it's like, okay, did you make a edgy joke back in the day? Maybe that's hate speech now, right? Did you, I don't know, have a sense of humor in the last 10 years, probably there's some hate speech in there, my guy. You like dark humor? There's probably something sus in there. Like it's very broad. It's very much like using a sledgehammer on a thumbtack. Like you're trying to deal with I would say a smaller problem by just breaking out the sledgehammer and trying to smash it in, like smash it to you're gonna break everything surrounding it at the same time when with that approach. And if there's other things around it, you're gonna affect that. So it's like very um it definitely steps on free speech. There's no question of that. And I don't really think that there's much value for Canadians to have this brought in because, you know, while I'm sure there are people who are committing hate speech, what would be considered hate speech, like by a normal definition on the internet, um, you can choose not to consume that content. And as long as you are using tools, and obviously, if the person is harassing you, that is different than them doing hate speech. If someone goes online and is like, I don't like XYZ, insert race, sexual orientation, whatever, into that XYZ, I don't like that, and they're going, that's hate speech. That's different than if I'm calling up Andy every day and being like, I don't know, I don't like you're straight and I don't like that, right? Like that's different than if I actually that probably
Asians
wouldn't fun.
or something like that, you know.
Yeah, like if I was like doing something like that, obviously that needs to be uh protected against. But again, harassment is not the same thing. So if you are like the people who are doing hate speech online, etc., where it's generally speaking, they're like speaking in a general term. Yeah, are they a piece of shit? Probably. Yes, almost definitely. Okay, you don't have to interact with them. There is no gun to your head. There's no one saying you have to interact with them. There's no saying you have to consume this content. So, as a normal person, you should be avoiding this. And I don't think that the government needs to come in here and try and decide that it's going to blanket smash everything that is vaguely related to that could be perceived as hate speech and take our ability to make have freedom of speech and like express ourselves and make that more and more difficult, like and allow people to like show the true colors of being a piece of shit. Like if they're gonna do hate speech online, like that they aren't worth your time. That's just great. And now I don't need to ever speak to you again. Like it's not like so I don't really understand the value proposition for Canadians, right? And I see the downsides as very large because if they're just blanket like deciding what's hate speech, they can apply that definition on a lot of stuff.
Well, to play out devil's advocate, the way that this bill is being sold is partly, well, not like completely, but part of the reason why they're doing this is to protect the Canadian youth. So, what do you have to say about that? Like,
How
because
are you?
youth spends a lot of time on the internet these days. There's social media and stuff like this, right? Youth are impressionable, and it could negatively affect their mental health a lot if they come across a lot of hate and bigotry and stuff like that on the internet.
Okay, but can the youth not handle going to a different website or not talking to the people who are committing hate speech? Like, or can parents not tell their kids not to go on sites that are going to be full of hate speech? Like, I don't really see why the government needs to be involved in this because like and with the amount of power that they're trying to apply on it, like jail time, fines, like that's, and these are big fines, right? 20,000, 50,000. Like these are big fines. Like this is not small fish. And then when you add on the retroactive things, like that becomes a even bigger problem, right? And
Yeah.
yeah,
To add to that, sorry to cut you off, but the 20,000 or $50,000 fine is actually it's actually worse than you think, because it's like it's not like you're giving this fine to the government. It's actually like somebody can sue you for doing hate speech towards them if they feel like they were one of the people that you discriminated against, and then they would get the compensation of that 20 or $50,000 fine. So it's like there's an incentive for people to, you know, file a lawsuit under these new laws to report discriminatory speech, so that like you would get fined. And it might not be the same amount. Maybe the government like tax some in. So maybe like if you did hate speech towards like somebody, you get fined like 10,000, but then the person actually receives like 20,000, and it's like, you know, the extra 10,000 comes from the taxpayer money or whatnot. But it's like, you know, it gives an incentive for people to report discriminatory behavior. So it's kind of like the government's bribing us to tell on each other. So what do
yeah,
you think about that?
that's the great. Just it's even better, man. You know, I'll just oh no. Yeah, I won't be able to benefit from this at all. I was just gonna say I'll go file some hate speech stuff, but I was
You're
like,
you're
wait a
like you're like speechless as you kind of absorb the gravity of the situation.
oh boy.
Like, oh boy. Okay, so let me, maybe now's a good time to share some of my thoughts, right? And my thoughts are that Canada's walking down the path of communism. So I know that sounds like an extreme thing to say, and I probably just offended like a few of you by saying that. But you know, we just spent the past like half an hour discussing like communism and, you know, topics in that field. And let me just say, before you call me the next Alex Jones or the next alt right, like, you know, Tucker Carlson or whatever, just, you know, hear this. Okay. So I am a Canadian citizen, but I was not born in Canada. I was born in an actual communist country called the People's Republic of China. And let me tell you that the way that this bill is being set up, this like Canadian bill, Online Harms Act, the way that this bill is being set up is exactly the way that the Chinese government regulates their internet. So, what do I mean by that? Well, in China, they create a committee, a special regulatory body that is, you know, that has powers beyond, you know, what the regular, like it's a very powerful organization, right? Has powers beyond the regular police. They create this regulatory body, which goes around, monitors the internet, and then they remove any keywords, right? So if you say like, you know, Tiananmen Square, Uyghurs, or like any of these like sensitive topics that the Chinese government doesn't want you to mention, then it goes and it censors you, and it reports you, and, you know, you can get fined, or you can get you know, other punishments, and even jail time and all that stuff, right? So it's basically the Gestapo is what I'm saying, right? You're creating this secret organ, or not so secret organization, but you're creating a special police organization that goes around and monitors like what people can say and what they can't say. So, you know, you can say that, oh, we're creating the Gestapo just to regulate hate speech. We're not trying to crack down on like you criticizing like the government or whatnot, like it is in China. But it's along the same lines, right? Like that line can get really blurry, right? So today we accept people getting fined or getting locked up for hate speech, and, you know, it's just a short jump to being locked up or fined for criticizing your government, right? Like, what if you don't like what if you don't like Justin Trudeau and you say something negative about him? Like, is that hate speech, or are you threatening a government official and stuff like that? Right. So my point is that that line can get really blurry. Right. So that's like kind of number one. And like, yeah, the retroactive thing is also another potential like similarity to China. If, you know, like, it doesn't matter if you posted about like Tiananmen Square years ago, or you posted it about it now, you can still get in trouble for it, right? And yeah, it's kind of very similar to the way that China regulates, and also it's like, China has this social credit score thing where your credit score is basically like, how loyal you are to the government and how good you are as a citizen. Whether your social score, it's like a credit score, but expanded to create like to make to include social kind of aspects to it as well. Like if you criticize the government, then your social score will go down, and if you like sing praises about Xi Jinping, then your social score goes up, right? So it's kind of like, you create it, if you create an incentive for people to tell on each other, whether it be like, you get rewarded with money if you successfully report someone for hate speech, or you get a boost in your social score for reporting someone for criticizing Xi Jinping. It's very similar, right? That's what I'm saying, right? It's You're creating this like police state where your neighbors are watching each other, and your neighbors are like, constantly trying to report you for their own financial gain or for their own like other gain of some sort. You create like communist China, you create the Stalinist USSR. Like this is exactly how like those countries are run, or were run, right? So yeah, that's kind of my point as to how I think this pushes us Canada as a country towards full communism. But this is just my opinion. And again, I'm sorry if you're offended. I hope I don't get locked up for hate speech for saying that. But Tristan, what are your thoughts? Do you think that my thoughts are too extreme, or do you think there's validity to it?
So I think you tend to go towards communism itself. I tend to go more so that it's more authoritarian than necessarily communist. Because to me, communism is the specific economic, we share everything basically, um, rather than the communist countries that you know we normally think of as communist, because in my opinion they're not like really communist, right? So I think that this is really leaning into the authoritarian side of the spectrum with regards to the political spectrum. So I think and to clarify, I would say that like China is on the more authoritarian side of that spectrum in that regard. Um, if that, and if that for that comparison. So I don't think that, let me, so it's definitely not a good thing for freedom of speech, is kind of where I'm at. Like I don't think it's something that will be benefiting our freedoms in general. And I think that your point about it being kind of like more communist, I think it's more so that it's authoritarian rather than communist itself. And I think it's basically the only area where we really differ on that front.
Yeah, and I think maybe to clarify my views is like, I think if you look at history, all the communist or self-proclaimed communist countries have gone down the authoritarian route, right? If you look at China, North Korea, USSR, Cuba, Venezuela, or Venezuela, I guess is like a heavily socialist government, but it's like they're so far down the socialist pathway, they might as well be communist. And yeah, Vietnam. If you look at all these countries, they've all tended to gear heavily to one degree or another, to various degrees, but they've all geared towards the authoritarian side, right? And I think that there's some, maybe inherent nature of communists, or like a communist system where it requires a strong centralized government to have more control over its citizens, right? Because the goal of communism is just to unite everybody and get everybody to work together. But as humans, we don't necessarily always want to go work together, and we don't get along with all the other people, and even in the same country. So the government has to be really strong to be able to like kind of organize things and force everyone to work together and stuff like that. So I just think that that kind of, forcing everyone to work together nature, it eventually spirals into uh, authoritarianism. Yeah, I whether you call it authoritarian, whether you call it communist, I don't. Again, as you said, I don't think it matters, right? I don't like the development that Canada is taking, whatever it is, whether it be like the communist path or whether it be an authoritarian government. We're headed down that path. That's the fact, right? And this is kind of the concern that I have for Canada's future, among many other things, as we discussed previously on this show. But yeah, that's just kind of what I have to say.